I don't think we'll finish this today, but we'll get as far as we can. For Thursday, though, what day is today? Today's Tuesday. For Thursday, if you haven't already started Sabriel, do go ahead and start it. I would say, try to get about a third of the way through. We won't get a third of the way into it, but do your best. I know I posted something over the weekend where I said I was going to do a lecture to try to catch up some pages. I didn't, because whatever this crud is I've had since September, I've had it since September, and it just won't shake in my throat's really bad. So we're going to spend a few minutes today to cover some of that material that we skipped the other day, because it's pretty important for the overall completion of this novel and the entire series. And so we're going to pick up on page 200. The previous recorded lecture that I did, that we picked up from on Thursday, ended right around page 200, 205. In fact, I think my last words on it were talking about on page 205, when Kitty notices, in looking at Bartimaeus in Ptolemy's form, that he's got two moles on his neck. Okay? So I want to back up for just a moment. Before that, pages 198, 99. So Kitty is summoned Bartimaeus, and they're talking, and he's, surprised and stuff, and thinks she's gone over to the dark side, so to speak, because here she is summoning him and such. And she, says, would you just shut up and just trying to blah, 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 blah. And 198.99. He calls her a conniving, treacherous, opportunistic, false-faced traitor who's taken it upon herself to add to my endless years of slavery, who set out to learn the cursed arts without prompting and without coercion. You can say this much for Nathaniel and the rest. They didn't have any choice in the matter. In other words, Nathaniel was forced into this, right? Because he was raised as a magician. She had free choice in the matter, okay? And she tells him, page 199, stop being so sniffy. Who's Nathaniel, by the way? Who? Never heard of it. You just know it. Okay? So he talks about, having many masters over his 5,000 years of existence, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? And there's always been enmity, hatred between them. Absolute tripe. What about you and Ptolemy? Kitty knew immediately, page 200, that her theory had been correct. The Jenny's response told her so. Okay? And what happens? There's silence. Okay? She's in her little circle. He's in his circle. And notice, earlier he had accidentally kind of touched the edge of the plane, as it were, that goes up from the circle, and burned his essence. Okay? And now he's just sitting there calmly, kind of in a lotus, position. And she looks in his eyes, and she just kind of falls, metaphorically, if you want, or symbolically, into his eyes. His eyes are like deep wells. It was terrible, yet beautiful. She was drawn to it as a child to a window. She'd been sitting safely in the center of a pentacle. Now she half uncrossed her legs, leaned forward, supporting herself on one arm, stretching out the other, reaching up slowly toward the eyes, toward their solitude and emptiness. And then she hears his voice all around her. Notice, the voice doesn't come from the body in the other circle. What do you presume to know about me? And what's the interesting thing about that voice? Whose voice is it not? Bartimaeus's. It's not Bartimaeus's regular voice. What are we told? It had sounded all around her, a voice different from any that she had heard before. It spoke in English, but the inflection was odd, as if the tongue found in the language as if the tongue found the language alien and strange. It sounded close, but also not so, as if dredged up from some incalculable distance. What do you know? Something in the voice unmanned her, but what? It didn't speak violently or with anger. And then the voice says, tell me. And there's anger in the voice, and there's power in the voice, and it's like everything in the room goes into a whirlwind. Okay? Kitty covers her head. I mean, she gets in that fetal position, bends down, covers her head, and says, please stop. And it stops. She looks at the boy. He looks at her. Page 202. If you're going to summon jinn, you summon their history with them. It's wise to keep matters firmly in the present, for fear of what. And she says, there was no need for that. I merely mentioned a name. You ought to know what names can do. What does he mean by that? You ought to know what names can do. What must magicians do to summon jinn? What must they know? Their names. In other words, names, Bartimaeus is suggesting, have power. Right? If you're so keen to keep matters in the present, why do you use his form? Why do you persist in wearing his form? Notice, wearing implies what? Like clothes. Put them on, take them off. Right? It is what? Clothing is what to your body? Totally separate. It has nothing to actually do with the body itself. What kind of is being implied there? What is the body to the essence of the individual? It's clothing. For Bartimaeus, where does his essence really exist? In the other place. And Stroud doesn't take it any further than that. But I find it very interesting that he leads up to that point and then just kind of drops it. Because if we take that idea to its logical extension, what does that then say about us? Right? And the body, versus the essence, the soul, whatever you want to call it, inside. C.S. Lewis, I can't remember which work, one of his essays, might be A Mere Christianity, talks about humanity as being not vegetable. Amphibious. What's an amphibian? It's a creature that lives in water and on earth. Both places. And he says, humans are the same. Why? They have a physical nature and they have a spiritual nature. They're not really totally at home in here or in here. They've got to have both. Okay? So, he responds when she says, why do you wear his guise? What makes you think I'm wearing anyone's guise? Okay, so here's a question. And I haven't resolved it yet. I don't know what the answer is. Who is speaking there? Is that Bartimaeus? Bartimaeus and Ptolemy joined. What jumped to the end? What happens at the end of the novel? Well, not even the end. Within 100 pages of it. No, more than that. Within about 150 pages of it. Nathaniel and Bartimaeus do what? They join. Nathaniel invites Bartimaeus into himself, right? Just like Makepeace invites Nauda or Nuda, however you want to pronounce his name, into himself. And Hopkins invites Faquarl into himself. Okay? Only difference is what happens to Quentin Makepeace and Clem Hopkins. What does Nauda do? We get the typical Western Christian portrayal of this, right? Takes over, pushes the mind down. I'm going to mention C.S. Lewis again. In C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, okay? In the second book called Paralandra, you have a character named Weston who invites into himself, okay, the source of all, he thinks, creative energy, the being that is both God and Satan and simultaneously, all this kind of stuff, okay? And he becomes possessed. He invites Satan into him. And every now and then, briefly, you hear the voice of Weston say to the main character, Ransom, help me, it's all darkness. And then he gets shut down, okay? Do we see Clem Hopkins and Quentin Makepeace come back? No. What's the difference between what happens with them and what happens with Nathaniel and Bartimaeus? We get a wonderful scene, we'll talk about it later, where Bartimaeus is talking for Faquarl. And it's Faquarl in Hopkins' body. And Bartimaeus says, yeah, but the difference is the boy is still here. We are sharing the mind. That can't happen. And Nathaniel pipes up, So, what makes you think I'm wearing anyone's guise? That kind of sounds like the speaker is saying, it's the real me. And it's what form? It's Ptolemy's form. So, I don't know. I've read this thing probably a dozen times since it's come out. And I teach it, if not once a year, at least every other year. And I ask the same question, and I still don't have any conclusions. So, he says, where'd you go from there? The boy could have been anyone. That is, the boy you saw could have been anyone. So Gideon says, well, I decided to try to figure it out. But I had to find your real name. Bartimaeus isn't your real name. Notice. Okay? And she talks about finally finding it out. And that's when on page 205, she mentions Ptolemy's Gate. And she says previously she had viewed the guys merely as a mask, a costume, one illusion among many. Now, while acknowledging that still to be true, okay, so we're told this is what Kitty thinks. That's still a mask that he takes on and off. She could not help but sense the ancient presence. God, he really is there. That the demon was and then we get that the demon was reproducing the boy. Not really there, Accurately, she had no doubt. For the first time, she noticed two moles on the thin brown neck, a little pale scar running beneath the chin, a particular boniness of the elbows under the slender arms, or on the slender arms. There is a devotion to detail here. Notice, by the way, devotion implies what? The rest of the sentence brings out the word. Love. If you're devoted to something, it means you love that thing. Okay? Devotion to detail that it can only come with genuine affection, or perhaps even with love. Okay? So she says, I'm going to set you free. He says, right. She goes, I just want you to listen. Listen to what I have to say. What does she offer? Why does she sell it? What's the purpose? Let's join together. Me and you, Ginnies. Gin, whatever, plural is. Okay? Let's join together. Let's overthrow the magical government. Okay? And he says, you're crazy. That'll never happen. Why? You can't trust me. I can't trust you. She says, why? What about Ptolemy, page 209? He was unique. He disproves everything you've said. That is, about not being able to trust humans. Or humans being able to trust jinn. Okay? He says, okay, even if I wanted to help you, 210, 100 other jinn, almost as potent as me, shared that sentiment and wanted nothing better than to cast her out with some Oprah humans. We couldn't. Why? Because the only way we can come here is being summoned. And that means losing free will. And if we don't have free will, then we cannot choose to help you. There's no equality in that equation. Rubbish. It doesn't have to be, really. Of course it does. What's the alternative? Would you be happy to give us control? Of course, if that was what it took. Now, notice what's happening right here. They're talking theory, right? What is she suggesting? Exactly what Quentin Makepeace and Clem Hopkins and all the others are going to do later on. Well, not quite exactly, but close. You wouldn't, not in a million years. I would if the trust were there. See, when Quentin Makepeace and Clem, when they do what they're about to do, is it because of trust? No, what do they see? What makes them come up with that idea? Second book, right? Honorius, the Ifrit that is bound to Gladstone's bones. You're like, he wasn't just taking on the form. He was actually in those bones. So they come up, well, we can do this. But what are they thinking? We can control these spirits. Being totally hubristic, arrogant in their pride, okay? And not realizing, a fingernail clipping of one of the demons is more powerful than the most powerful human mind, so to speak, okay? He says, okay, prove it. Step out of your sin trap. What? You heard me. Come on, cross the lines. Come on, kitty. Step over. Let's see you put your money. Well, how about it? You just told me what you'd do to me if I stepped out. Oh, I was just kidding. Just bluffing. Come on. Put your trust in me. Okay, say nothing. I don't care. I'll read Ptolemy's notes for myself. That is, she tries to get him the same way. He won't. Oh, so you understand ancient Greek now, do you? Okay. Next chapter. John's thinking. All demons lie. Incontrovertible fact. Why is he thinking that? Because he's just heard in the previous chapters where John was mentioned, or where he was active, he's just heard Kitty Jones is alive. It's not that he thinks that's the lie. The lie is Bartimaeus lied to me and said she was dead. And now he wants to know, he's wondering, why? Why did Bartimaeus lie? 2:16. To protect Kitty. Well, why would a demon want to protect a girl? It presupposed a closeness, some kind of bond. Could this be so? Notice the notion coiled and slithered deep inside him. Okay? Next page at the bottom. He had no allies, he had no friends, he lost the support of the prime minister, he's going to be put on trial by the council. In other words, the world is falling apart around him. He's got a Hail Mary, to survive. He's got to do something. He pulls out his scrying glass. Okay? Why? Because he wants to see Kitty's face. And he's driving along, back of his car, and this is when he meets, and we talked about this briefly the other day, Ms. Lutyens, page 219 and following. He asked, "Can I have a word?" He hadn't needed to do this exactly, but he found he wanted to make the best impression. "What do you want?" "Ooh, that's a nice, greeting. What do you want?" "Just a chat. I wanted to see if you recognize me." "Oh, yes, I do." "Oh, sorry, you don't go by the thing anymore, do you?" All right. Talks about the commoners. That's what we're calling them now in public, he agreed. They seem to prefer it, but that is people, not commoners. Doesn't mean anything, of course. "I see," she says, 222. "No, thank you, quite all right. Sure, none of the departments would want an old commoner like me thrust into their midst. Anyway, I still rather enjoy my job. Kind of you." Okay. He says, "I can drop you off." She says, "No, thank you." "Well, that's the way you feel about it. It's been a pleasure. Don't mention, do you really think," she says, bottom of 222, "that I want to tell the world that I once saw you, the great John Mandrake, our beloved information minister, hanging upside down with your bottom in the air? That I heard your yelps and wails of pain as cruel men beat you? You think I'd tell this? That's really what you... No, not that. I meant my name." "Oh, I've got better things to do with my time. Yes, even I, with my silly little unimportant job, don't have a great desire to betray the children I once worked with, no matter what they've become." Notice, no matter what they've become, not who they become. "Your birth name, Mr. Mandrake, is safe with me. John, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I didn't get a chance back then to thank you." She goes, "No, I think I do understand. And I am pleased to know it. But you mistake yourself." Notice, she doesn't say, "You are mistaken." She says, "You mistake yourself. You don't understand yourself. It was the boy who was grateful to me, and you are no longer that boy." She just told him, you aren't grateful. That boy was, but that boy's dead. You do not speak for him. We have nothing in common, you and I. He's like, "I've never known you. I knew Nathaniel. John Mandrake can go to hell. I wanted to say that I know you were trying to save me. And yes, and I'm sorry I didn't." In her mind, he is what? Beyond saving. He's already lost. Okay? What effect does that have? I mean, that and the idea that Kitty is still alive, those two twin ideas just worm down into his consciousness. Okay? Let's see here. Okay, so we picked up with chapter 18 last time. So now we're going to go back to where we left off. And that was the end of 21, I believe. So now in part 4, we're going to skip the part in Alexandria. Other than Bartimaeus and Ptolemy talked about the other place, right? And Ptolemy, says, top of 304, if a gate does open up, I'm going to need something on the other side to guide me safely through. Okay? What's he mean? So if a gate opens up to the other place, what's he saying I'm going to need on the other place side of the gate? He doesn't use these terms. He says, but I'm going to need a reference point. That is, something I can latch onto for what purpose? What is every reference point? It's a direction. Okay? It's the thing that provides some kind of stability. Okay? So, Bartimaeus says, 304. That's a problem. There are no destinations in the other place. Why? The other place is not what? Material. It's not material. There's no matter there. And because there's no matter, you could say, in a materialistic sense, there's no there. Okay? No mountains, no forests. I've told you. He says, I know. That's where you come in. What's he mean? I'm going to need you to call me, essentially. Okay? So he says, when I finish my incantation, I'm going to call your name 3 times. If you want, answer me. I believe that will be enough to provide the destination I shall need. Okay? Now go on to Kitty. So, Kitty comes out of her swoon or her passing out, whatever it is, and she and Nathaniel talk about, make pieces taking over and such. Let's see here, we're going to skip a bunch. Bottom of 318 is where Makepeace mentions how he and Hopkins came up with this idea. That they realized, Gladstone's bones were inhabited by the demon and they could do the same. People with page 319. The commoner in your workroom, he heard the demon talking in his head. It would have driven him mad. Makepeace says. Only because he did not have the will to suppress the demon. With individuals of intelligence and strong personality such as us, the effect will be harmonious. Okay? Interesting. Because what does harmony imply? They'll be working in tandem. They'll be working together. That's not what he means, though. He means we will do what? We will control that power within. Okay? So, Nathaniel, steps forward and says, I want Kitty kept alive, chapter 23. He says, this is a brilliant plan. I'm with you. And Makepeace says, okay, yeah, he can have her. And we're told, bottom of 323. Twice now that evening, Kitty Jones had nearly died, and all because of what he'd done. Because he found her, because he drenched her out of her quiet new life, brought her with him just to satisfy his selfish curiosity. When, in the theater, the inferno struck her, Nathaniel had thought her dead. Sorrow had overwhelmed him. He had been almost unmanned with guilt. There's that second time I think we've seen the word unmanned. What does it mean? We could use it, we could say, oh, that's a sexist term. Unpersoned. Unbodied. To be undone. Okay? Well, it's kind of interesting because we're going to see Kitty undone pretty soon. And Nathaniel, in a sense, is going to be undone. Despite the mercenary's harsh warning, he flung himself beside her and only then realized that she breathed. Notice, the mercenary, the guy with the 7-league boots, warns, and Nathaniel does what? Kind of without even thinking. Pretty important. He sacrifices himself for Kitty. He jumps in front to protect her. Little by little, he'd begun to recognize his folly, 324 at the top. Already in the last few days, he'd begun to detach himself from the name of Mandrake. From the role that for years had become a second skin. There's the idea again. It's like a guise he put on. So who is the real Nathaniel? But only with the events in the theater did that detachment become a true separation. The two key certainties that governed him, his belief in the invulnerability of the government and in the essential virtue of his motives, were dashed from him. So, the government, what's the term? The invulnerability of the government. So now he thinks the government is vulnerable. What else? The essential virtue of his motives. Oh, I only think and do what is best. Not what is best for me, for all. Now he thinks, sees, understands, I'm an ass. Okay. In other words, he's experienced what? Or he understands what? Real humility. He's been humbled by this. The magicians were overpowered. Kitty was struck down. Both came at the hand of Makepeace. And it was with horror that Nathaniel recognized in that callous, indifferent hand a reflection of his own. In other words, he looks at Makepeace. What's he see? I'm no different than he is. The only difference is what? He sees that. And that's what makes him different. Okay? So, Nathaniel, Kitty comes back. Nathaniel tells her, I'm going to help get you out of here. Skipping a bit. He calls Nauta into him. Nathaniel tells Kitty 3:30. In a moment, I will be called upon to join this madness. I will pretend to do so. Do not be alarmed. At the last minute, I shall use the pentacle to summon a troop of the strongest jinn. With luck, they will destroy, make peace with these other fools. At the very least, we shall have the opportunity to escape. You don't seem overly impressed. Kitty's eyes were tired, red-rimmed. Had she been crying? He didn't notice. And she says, I hope you're right. Okay? So, let's see. He summons Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus shows up, and he recognizes the quarrel. He recognizes Nauta. And Pages 340 and following, Bartimaeus talks with Facoro and Nauta, and they explain what their idea is. And Nauta invites Bartimaeus to join with them. 345. Notice, the slime drew itself as tall as it could. See, Bartimaeus can't even take on a proper form at this point. He's been so weakened. He says, thanks, your offer's curious, it's kind. I gotta go back to another place to recharge. I've had enough. My only wish is to return to the peace of the other place as fast as I can. Now, that's an odd decision. For Quarrel, Bartimaeus is fickle and perverse. He should be destroyed. Okay? He says, no. Nauta says, no, the genie is free to go. My gratitude is undying, and one last request. You know, it's my earthly reign beginning. Go ahead, ask away. Whatever you ask shall be yours. Spare the lives of these two. Leave the boy and the girl alone. In other words, don't make them call somebody else into them. Just leave them alone. I've given my word, Ginny, 346. I cannot break it. But this is ill done. I need some ballast in my belly. I was going to eat one of them, particularly the girl. The boy looks sour and sinewy. I believe his fat flesh would taste like candle wax. But she is... You could do all kinds of stuff with this. She is edible beyond doubt. And you would have me spare them. Quarrel is right. So he says, all right, I promised. And Bartimaeus goes. Okay? So we're going to skip a bit again. She and Mandrake, Nathaniel, continue talking. 350, 51. Let's see here. He explains to her, now that we have promised not to kill you, us, doesn't mean any of the others haven't. Okay? And she smacks him because he says, it's the kind of ambiguity, top of page 350, they normally pounce on. Yes, they'll eat you soon enough, take it from me. What was that for? What for? For everything. For abducting me, for getting me into this mess, for being a member of the stupid government, for the war, for being a magician, for enslaving demons and spurring them to invade our world, for being a complete and utter idiot, and for what you just said. Meaning what? He just said, we're both going to die for being defeatist. He said, okay, I'm sorry, but we're powerless. The demons are loosed upon the world. We're powerless. You're wrong. Okay? Let me back up. All right, he said, I'm sorry. Sorry for what I've done to you, for what I did before, and now I should have left you alone. I regret I've got you into this. But what's the point of saying it? That is, what's the point of saying I'm sorry? What good's it going to do? It's all irrelevant. She says, you're wrong. Your apology isn't irrelevant. Because what does it mean he's showing? What does every apology mean? I'm wrong. Okay? It's looking inwardly and seeing something isn't right. And you're a fool if you can't see it. I'm grateful that you stopped Makepeace from having me killed. Now, stop being a wet blanket and try to think of something to do. Okay? They talk about Bartimaeus. He saved our lives. Mandrake, yes. He's surprised. And I don't think he did it for me. Why? And he pulls out his scrying glass. He sees what the others are doing. Okay. He talks about Gladstone's staff. With Gladstone's staff, maybe he could fight off Nauta and such. She asked him about Ptolemy's Gate. Okay? And so he tells her, top of 3854, a method of reversing the normal summoning process, whereby the magician withdraws for a time to the particular remoteness where demons reside. The author claims to have done it. Good enough. Okay? You want to know what's the formula? How do you do it? He said, are you crazy? 357. Why do you persist in this? Why do you want to know? Ptolemy used the gate to reach out to the jinn. It was a gesture of reconciliation, of good faith. We need to do this if we're to get, what? Get some. Kitty, the demons are our enemies. They have been for millennia. They're invading. Some are invading, not all. Bartimaeus didn't agree to stay. He shows loyalty to us, she says. Certainly to me, maybe you. Nah. His loyalty changes. What? I summoned him. Yes, I'm a commoner. I summoned him. Bottom of 357. Okay? Commoners are taking control of the streets. The old certainties are falling apart, Mandrake, and only those who adapt are going to prevail. I intend to. Top of 358. What about you? Any moment now, if the quarrel's going to walk back in and lead you before now, do you want to keep quibbling? Only one person in his past has treated him with absolute trust, and that was Ptolemaeus. Not the same, the very same. He used the gate, he made the gesture. Why do you think Bartimaeus still wears his form? And remember, Bartimaeus, well, not remember because it's going to come up. Bartimaeus is going to tell Kitty when she gets to the other place, you're the only one in over 2,000 years who has asked, why do you take this form? What other person's form has Bartimaeus started taking? Kitty's. He said he had a bond with us too, but that there were limits to it. And she takes that to mean what? Don't you see? Bottom of 358. If I can follow him, I know that I need to call Bartimaeus' name as part of the incantation. In other words, he said there were limits. Remove the limits. All right? So, what's the plan? He teaches her the incantation. She's going to stay there in that little room, curled up in her little ball, so to speak. She's going to mentally, spiritually, soully, S-O-U-L-L-Y, go to the other place while Nathaniel's going to attempt to do what? Get the staff of Gladstone. Okay? She's going to seek Bartimaeus' help. So, to 363, top. His final conversation with Kitty had lit a fire within him. To Nathaniel, it seemed she had burned away all his weaker emotions. It scarcely mattered that she had pinned her hopes on Ptolemy's Gate, a mirage, a phantom, a fairy tale. It was the look in her eyes as she talked of it that fascinated him. Excitement had shone there, and wonder and belief. Sensations Nathaniel had almost forgotten. In other words, all of those things had been nearly exterminated in him, so that he'd become what? What are those examples of? Okay? Wonder, belief, excitement, fascination. If you read that Tolkien fairy story essay, those are all elements of the childlike mind that says the world is full of what? Possibilities. Rather than merely the stuff that we see, feel, touch, smell, hear, okay? Taste all around us. He felt cleansed, almost eager for what was to come. I'm using this term very loosely, okay? It's almost like he's been baptized. Like his mind has been born new. Like all the crap that he's learned, been taught by other magicians, has been wiped away. Right? He glanced across. Her face was pale but set. He hoped he would not weaken in front of her. Notice he wants to be. He wants her to see him as strong. Right? So, he goes to get the staff. He sees Jessica Whitwell, and what does Jessica Whitwell prove about herself? Even though she's in charge of the security services, she's not what? She's not like all the other magicians. She knows, ultimately, right from wrong. Okay? And she doesn't choose to go along with their plans. 27, Kitty. Page 373. Bartimaeus had prompted her to try it. She knew he had. His last words, as he left them, had echoed his description of Ptolemy. We do have a bond, but for the present, there are limits to it. For the present. What was that if not an implicit invitation to her and her alone? Ptolemy had known no limits. He had come to the other place by rejecting all the established magical conventions, by turning them on their head. See? That's what's just, by the way, happened to John. All those magic, they're gone. And you need more than the basic knowledge of summoning to do what he had done. Crucial part was calling to the demon at the end. Kitty could do this. Why is that the crucial part, by the way? And notice what also that implies, because Bartimaeus is going to tell us this. Names are what? Okay, not only are they powerful, but what else do they do? They're limiting. Okay? So, bottom of 373, top of 374. Remembered fragments came into her head, words written by past authorities about the other place, a region of chaos, a whirl of endless abominations, a sump of madness. Cheerful pronouncements, all. Then there was Mr. Button's pithy edict. To venture there risks body and soul. Oh, God. So what would happen to her? It's the only time, I believe, in the book that we hear that phrase, oh, God. There's no other reference to God or lowercase kind of gods at all. It's kind of interesting, because it's right at the point of separation, dissolution of body and soul. Okay? So, Ptolemy had gone and come back alive. She's thinking, he could do it, I could do it. But now she's also thinking of Nathaniel, top of 375. Nathaniel had saved her from the mercenary's knife. She had enjoyed it. Notice she knows his name. He told her his name. She had enjoyed sparring with him, forcing him to face the truth about many things. Bartimaeus, most of all. He'd taken it surprisingly well. As for Bartimaeus, she remembered how she'd last seen him. A forlorn, shapeless mass of slime, worn down by, was it wrong to be pursuing him? The bell continues to ring. Okay? 376, she feels the rushing. She feels the four barriers all around her. She goes through these barriers, okay? One was dark and solid, threatened to crush her with remorseless weight. That's earth. The next was a raging fluid, which surged avidly to carry her away. That's water. The third barrier toward her with the unseen tumult of a hurricane. That's air. And the fourth was an implacable wall of unquenchable fire. That's fire. The four basic elements to ancient Greek thought. Okay? 377, bottom of the page. She goes to the other place. 4 lines up from the bottom of that last long paragraph. She had no fixed point, no reference point, no singularity to call her own. Indeed, she seemed often to be in several places at once. The effect was most disorientating. And the Brits love this word. Whether you add the dis in front of it or not. Orientate. They love adding on that suffix. In America, we don't add that. We say to orient something. They say to orientate. The 8 implies the doing of the orienting. Okay? What does it mean to orient something? Literally, it means to position it towards the east. The orient. That's why people from Asia used to be called Oriental. It referred to the direction from the west, right? So notice, the effect was most disorientating. Why? Because there is no east. There's nothing to orient to. She sees a fleck of color, tries to fix upon that. Everything's, swirling around her. Kitty's thinking, I need a body. What is she not doing yet? Notice, what must you do when you go into the other side, other place, go beyond the gate? You've got to call that other person. And finally, 382, Bartimaeus, where are you? Okay. And she starts seeing faces. There's her parents. There's Mr. Pennyfeather. There's others that come up and tell her, you're not welcome here. Go away. Jacob Heernet shows up. 384, very bottom. Another image flicks into view. Hello, Kitty. Get lost. And I was thinking you were seeking after me, asking after me. Right? We go back to Nathaniel. Let's skip a bunch. He grabs the amulet of Samarkand. He grabs the staff. Notice he's, loaded for bear, essentially. And 397. We have Kitty and Bartimaeus. Okay. 397. Right exact middle of the page. It's harder than you know. This is Bartimaeus speaking to her. You're the first since Ptolemy to succeed. It requires the ability to separate from yourself, which is an impossibility for magicians, being what they are. What does that mean? It's an impossibility for magicians being what they are. Does that mean because they're magicians? No. What's he suggesting about magicians? I think he's saying something about the quality of magicians. They're in love with themselves. They're ultimately selfish. Because what do you have to do to want to dominate somebody or something else? It's like in Harry Potter novels and using the Imperius curse. You are imposing your will on those other things. You're saying, you have no will. My will is now yours. Tolkien in that fairy story essay talks about magic. And he says it's the domination of wills and things, which he distinguishes from enchantment, which is shared enrichment. Come here, look at this. Or taste this, or. And he says, It's impossible for magicians. Okay? Those who fail go mad. That's my problem. That's that separation, not being me. Try making yourself a guise. That is, come on, give yourself a form. And so they go back and forth. $3.99. Kitty says, I need something to look at other than all this mess. What does she mean by mess? How is the other place described? It's chaos. What is the word? You've got chaos. What does the word cosmos mean? It's not just the universe. It means order. It's chaos turned to order. Okay? Structure, hierarchy. $3.99. Bartimaeus, middle of the page. You humans are so inconsistent. You claim to love stability and order, but what's Earth if not one big mess? Chaos, violence, dissent, and strife, whichever way you look. It's far more peaceful here. But maybe I can help you out, make things a little easier. Keep control of that lovely body of yours now. I wouldn't want those arm things to fall off. That would ruin its perfection. Kind of interesting. Because what does he say about a body when he's on earth? It's heavy. It's painful. Here he says, your body, and he's not talking just about Kitty's form, like she's the ideal female. He's saying your body is perfection, which is very, interesting from a history of ideas kind of idea thing. Okay? So, they keep talking, and she says, bottom of 400, Bartimaeus. Names, names, names. Now, they're the ultimate restriction. They're the worst curse of all. Each one is a sentence of slavery, right? Because if somebody on earth knows one of the names of a jinn, they can use that to summon them. Here, we are one. We have no names. Why? Because here in the other place, there is no, Bartimaeus is suggesting, I. It's all we. This tumble of consciousnesses, if you want. What do the magicians do? They reach in with their summons, their words draw us out, piece by screaming peace. As each piece passes through, it is defined. It gains a name and power of its own, but is separated from the rest. What happens then? Like performing monkeys, we do tricks to please our masters, lest they hurt our fragile essence. Even when we return here, we are never safe. Once a name has been bestowed, we can be called again and yet again until our essence is worn away. Okay? So, why have you come here, Kitty? Bottom of 401. Because that's what Ptolemy did. I wanted to prove myself, show that I trusted you. I don't want slaves, but I need your help, which is why I've come. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to help? Those spirits, they plan to fall in London and kill its people. Oh, they haven't yet? They're being slow about it. Most of the people in London are innocent. They don't want the magicians any more than you do. I'm asking you on their account, Bartimaeus. Notice, she doesn't say I'm asking you for me. I'm asking you for Nathaniel. She's asking him for on account of unnamed people. It's they who are going to suffer. And he nods, sadly. For Quarrel and Doubter are sick. It's what happens to some of us when we're summoned many times. Okay? So she asks, so what do you do here? Betraying what? Her earthly mentality. And how much is that really our earthly mentality? What happens when you meet somebody for the first time? What's one of the first questions, if not the first question, that comes out after, what's your name? What do you do? As if a job is the identity of the individual, rather than just as a means of putting food on the table. It's not about doing, it's about being. Don't expect to understand it. You're a human, Bible 402. You can only see surfaces, and then you want to impose yourself upon them. What's he saying? Humans want to do what? Take this and put it on this. Try to make sense of everything. The only problem is sometimes nothing makes sense. Sometimes you can't wrap your mind around it. Okay? So they keep talking. And he says, now it's pretty powerful. You're going to have a hard time. What if we have the staff? Gladstones? How? Who'd get it? Nathaniel's trying to get it right. Wait, what? You know his name? Uh-huh. I like that, top of 404. He's been giving me jip for years, simply because I could have spilled the beans. Notice, could have. Did not. Now he's telling any old broad he meets free of charge. Oh, and by the way, you used his name last time we spoke. Okay? So, he's gone for the staff. Bartimaeus says what? I'm weak, man. I'm not recharged enough. So, but if you came back and we had the staff, okay. Top of 405. Ptolemy showed me the way it might have been. He remarked at last. He thought he would be the first of many, but in 2,000 years, Kitty, you're the only one who's followed him. The only one. He and I conversed as equals for 2 years. I helped him out from time to time. In return, he let me explore your world a little. I wandered as far as the Pheasant Oasis, etc., etc. The experience was exhilarating. My freedom echoed that of my home, while my interest was roused by what I saw. The pain I felt was never too pressing, since I was able to return here when I wished. How I danced between the worlds. It was a great gift that Ptolemy gave me. I've never forgotten it. I knew him for 2 years, and then he died. Okay? So, part 5. We go back to Alexandria, which we're going to skip. Ptolemy, just as he's about to die, page 415-16, frees Bartimaeus. He snapped his fingers, spoke the dismissal words, page 415. Even as he did so, the door exploded in a shower of molten metal. 3 tall figures sprang into the room. Ptolemy gave me a small salute. His head fell back gently against the wall. I rotated toward the enemy, raised a paw to smite them, but my substance had become diffuse like smoke. All light around me vanished. My consciousness departed. The other place pulled me away. Furiously against my will, I accepted Ptolemy's last gift. Ptolemy dies doing what? Freeing Bartimaeus. Nice little bit of foreshadowing. Right? So, John comes back, wakes up Kitty. He looks into her eyes, page 421. She's changed, right? What's happened? Her hair looks different. Her face looks different. And he says, no, your eyes, top of 421. They haven't changed at all. Oh, you think? Well, they were fine before you started squinting. In other words, oh man, kill her eyes. Take my word for it. Kitty, I have to tell you something. And so the demons, he says, are all out or all over. So they get the staff. Let's see here. Page 425. Bartimaeus says, I would never have done it had it not been for the girl, but she had been quite correct back there in the other place to appeal to me in Ptolemy's name. And she'd instantly perceived that was my weak spot, my open wound. Okay, so here's a question. How can you have a weak spot, an open wound, without there being any kind of materiality? How can you wound just pure consciousness? 2,000 years of accumulated cynicism hadn't managed to heal it up, try as I might. In other words, his cynicism is what? His smartassery is all what? It's all part of the costume. It's all part of the role play. It's not the real him. But Ptolemy had believed it, and that was enough. Just the echo of his faith was powerful enough to win me over when Kitty repeated his great gesture. She renewed his bond. And once that was done, my fate was sealed. Okay? So, Nathanael calls Bartimaeus into him. 427. Gone. The pain was gone. That was my first sensation. That was all that mattered. It was like a curtain had suddenly been flung open, and everything had gone from dark to light. It was like being plunged into an ice-cold spring. It was a little like returning to the other place after months of slavery. It was like being refreshed and rebuilt and reborn all at the same time. Notice, every one of those sentences begins how? It was like. Why? Because it's not it was. Similes only do what? They compare. They're not metaphors. They're not this is this. Okay? My essence surged with a terrible joy, the kind I hadn't felt on earth since my first few summonings back in Sumer, when I thought my energies could cope with anything. I was 10 times the genie I'd been before. No wonder Quarrel and the others had recommended it. Why is it like this? Any guesses? Notice what he's not having to do. He's not having to build the guys, so to speak. He's taking a shape that's already there. Okay? So, my essence was immersed in bone, top of 428, in blood and little thready things that I suppose might have been sinew. I'd spread throughout him from hair to toe. He sees, feels the brain, the thoughts, and for a moment there I marveled. It was like stepping into a great building, some holy mosque or shrine, and glimpsing its perfection, something airy, built of clay. There's that amphibian kind of idea that I mentioned with C.S. Lewis. Then came the secondary wonder, that such a ropey thing, the brain, could actually work at all. See, cognitive scientists still don't know exactly how consciousness is built. Many think it's purely an electrochemical product of the brain. Others don't know. That's what Bartimaeus is struck by. The wonder of it. Okay? And so John finally speaks, 429. Kitty, you'd never believe it. It's like everything's got more colors, more dimensions. And around you, there's such a glow. That was her aura. Always stronger than average since her visit to another place, it had waxed into noonday splendor. And I don't know if Stroud read Tolkien's essay. No idea. But I think the description that we're getting here of what Nathaniel is experiencing, this is Tolkien's idea of recovery. This is seeing as we ought to see each person, a walking splendor. You're so beautiful. Oh, only now, that is, He goes, no, I meant. And Nathaniel, Bartimaeus intervenes. And then he says, middle 4:30, just, for a little light point. Some of your thoughts, Nathaniel, well, if Kitty only knew. Meaning, Bartimaeus, being fully one with Nathaniel, knows exactly what he's thinking. Okay? So, they go off after the others. And notice what Nathaniel and Bartimaeus have got to work out. We probably will finish this because I'm going to skip a whole bunch. Who's in control, right? Because the brain does what? Controls the motor functions. And so, Bartimaeus, who has never actually walked in a human body, doesn't understand how. Okay? Go look at the original Boris Karloff Frankenstein. And what does the monster do when it first gets up? It's, even though it's human, it's reanimated, kind of different. So, they protect people. They come across other, magicians and such. Piper, John's assistant, Farrar, right? And they say they're going to have to help people. And Farrar, she's just a commoner, page 450, 451, et cetera, et cetera. Kitty tells them, you guys need to protect the people and such. We're going to skip a bunch. Let's see here. 459. They're in St. James Park, which is real near Buckingham Palace, by the way. And they're going off trying to find Nuda and such, for quarrel's already been taken care of. And we're told, bottom of 459, the power of the staff was irresistible. The 7 league boots, because he, remember, killed the mercenary to get him, carried us more swiftly than the enemy could see. Nathaniel was cold and resolute. With every minute, he controlled the staff with greater skill. As for me, whether or not it was the adrenaline we shared, I began to enjoy myself hugely. I slowly awoke again to the old bloodlust, to the fierce joy of combat I'd known in early Egypt's wars when the Utuku of Assyria marched from the deserts and the gathering vultures blotted out the sky. It was the love of speed and cleverness, of defying death and dealing it. It was the love of carrying out new exploits that were to be told and sung around the campfires till the sun went out. It was the love of energy and power. It was part of Earth's corruption. Ptolemy wouldn't have been pleased. In other words, Bartimaeus is experiencing what? The exact ideas that drew Nauta in the first place, essentially. Power. Control, okay? Fulfillment of self. But it was a good deal better than being a pyramid of slime. So Ptolemy wouldn't approve. That's Bartimaeus is realizing this isn't good. But it's better than being a slug. Okay? So, sorry, Fackrell's about to get it. 467 and following, Bartimaeus chats with Fackrell and tells Fackrell, Mandrake and I share this being, because Fackrell, where's Clem Hopkins? He's dead for all intents and purposes, right? And Fackrell says, your discovery is remarkable, bottom of 469, but it comes too late for me. He made some movement or other with his fleshly body, don't remember what, but I was conscious of the boy's immediate command, a stab of pure white light, it faded, vanished, scoured Fackrell from the earth. Okay? So there's Fackrell gone. So now they've got to go after Nada. Notice what begins happening in, I think it begins in this chapter. Yes, in chapter 36. 36, Kitty. All the previous chapters would have a number, and then at the top of the next page, you'd have the narrator's name. What happens in 36? We start shifting back and forth between multiple narrators. Okay? So we get Kitty, then we get Nathaniel. Okay? Because Nathaniel hears Kitty's voice, stops him dead in his tracks. Kitty speaks to Bartimaeus and such. Okay, where are they headed to? The pavilion. This is for the World's Fair. This was an actual famous glass pavilion built for the 1896 World's Fair, I think. It's called the Crystal Palace. Okay? Metal structure, but total glass. All right? So, 478. Nah, we're not going to fish this. We'll get really close, I think. Bartimaeus thinks, the main problem was the way they played off each other. Simply put, their mutual presence spurred each other on. Trapped as I was inside Nathaniel, I could certainly see how the girl inspired him. Perhaps I can't vouch for Kitty so much, but in my vast experience, strong characters of their sort tend to gravitate together. Pride has a part to play, and other emotions too. Neither wishes to fail. Each redoubles their efforts to impress. Things get done. Not always the right things, not always the things you expected, and there's not much you can do to stop it. What's he getting at? They're pushing each other forward, right? The only problem is, what has got to be done? Now it's got to be stopped, no matter what, all right? John gets hurt, bottom of 483, top of 484. Really hurt, not just, and he thinks 484, my side. Don't look at it, we're all right. Not so good. My side, I can't feel it. It's fine, don't worry about it. You're concealing something. Well, what was that, Nathaniel? Nothing. I was thinking we have to get up, get away. Nauder calls out to them. My side feels numb. I can't relax. I'll see if I can fly us out. No, wait, what about Nauder? He's a big boy, he can fly. Okay. Oh, look, I'm no medic. Forget it. I could be wrong. But you're not, are you? Tell me the truth for once. What are we being told? What is Stroud, author, preparing us for? This is not going to be a happy ending. Okay? John sees Kitty. Her hair is matted, disordered. One side of her face is scratched. Kitty, the attack with the staff failed, middle of 486. The thing's too strong. I tried it at maximum controllable power. Notice, I tried it at maximum controllable power. trying to assert the self over the thing. What will happen if we leave now to now? He asked Bartimaeus. And he says, he's going to conquer the world. Okay. Maximum controllable power, top of 487. Nathaniel says. I said. That's one way of getting more energy from it, and that's by removing Gladstone's safeguards. In other words, maximum power. No, Kitty says. John asks, one other thing. What's this building made of? Glass. And Bartimaeus cuts in. You know, he might have a point. Iron, says Nathaniel. Iron. And now being a spirit is not protected against it. If the staff is broken and it all comes crashing down on him, that is, if we release all the power of the staff and the superstructure of this building, which is all iron, comes down on Nauda, Bartimaeus, might work. One small flaw, Kitty, yeah. Here's the small flaw. How do you break the staff without being harmed? What's she really mean? How do you live? And what about the roof? John, Nathaniel, sorry. Leave that to me. We'll be all right. Okay, all right, I'll do this. No, you won't. You've got to leave. Bartimaeus will protect us with the shields. We'll be all right. His mind drifted a little bit. Okay? We'll catch up to you. Just keep running. Nathaniel, go, Kitty. Nada will leave the palace soon. Chance will be gone. I'm not. Her defiance warmed him. He grinned at her. Listen, I'm the magician. You're the commoner. I'm the one who orders you, remember? Sure you'll be able to use the boots? Of course. I'll see you both outside. Promise? Yes. Now go. The amulet. It'll keep you safe. No, won't be any good for me. Why? What does the amulet not do? It doesn't heal gaping holes in your side, which is what he has. Okay. She leaves. Bartimaeus says, or Nathaniel kind of says, how's that? Not bad. He looked at Kitty. She had halted with the amulet outstretched. Her eyes searched Nathaniel's face. He saw her aura shining all about them, picking out everything in clear, unblemished detail. The tree bark, the veins upon the leaves, the stones, the grass about their feet. He felt himself bathed within it. Bathed within her glory. His weariness departed. See you later, Kitty. Goodbye. What do you think, Bartimaeus? Do we go for it? Suppose we might as well. Got nothing better to do. That is, it's our only hope. Kitty. Okay. Kitty goes out. Middle of 490. At that same moment, she was conscious of a noise, of a dull bowl, of a sound that seemed almost to swallow itself, flaring and subsiding on the instant. The grass she stood on rose and fell into a little tremor. Kitty turned toward the glass palace, sinking to her knees, and boom! The amulet of Samarkand fell hard against her face. She saw it glowing, drawing in the raging energies. See, if she hadn't kept it, she'd have been gone. But it just does what? It sucks up all this. She lay there watching. Chapter 37. Hold on a second. No, we'll stop there. So we'll do these last two chapters on Thursday and jump into Savriel. We'll probably take 20 minutes maybe to finish this. I never did get a quiz up at all, did I? Not even over part one. I'll put up, I still want to do two quizzes. I'll still put up two quizzes. I'll put up a part one quiz over this is what, about 500 pages. Over the first, let me see, what's a good place to break. First 250 pages or so. So through chapter 18. I'll put up a quiz over through chapter 18 today. And I'll put another one up from 19 to the end. And I'll probably also do that today. And they'll both be due by, I'll say Sunday. And then I'll do an exam for all 3 books. That'll be probably due the following Wednesday, maybe the following Sunday. All right. Thank you all.